The story they really don't want us to focus on today, the history that Donald Trump made today when 2 articles of impeachment were announced against him, making him the 4th president ever to face impeachment. And if impeached, as he's expected to be in the House, he'll be the 3rd president in our country's history to have been impeached.
That's right, and 2 very tightly focused articles putting to bed a debate that had been going on here on Capitol Hill for a while about whether or not Democrats would try to include anything from the Mueller report or any of these other instances where they believe the president might have conducted himself in an impeachable fashion. Instead, what we see here is 1 article on abuse of power, focused again very tightly on Ukraine, and another on obstruction of Congress, not more broadly obstruction of justice, as some folks had surmised that might have included some of those elements of the Mueller report. Part of that is political. These are very simple to understand charges. They follow around one specific incident or set of incidents, and it's something that I think the Democratic leaders believe they can get the votes for. Although I will say it is a bit striking. Both Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, the number 2 Democrat in the House, said they're not whipping votes on this. They're not counting votes on this. They see this as a vote of conscience for all those who will be taking it. That said, you do not generally see Nancy Pelosi put something on the floor unless she knows she has the votes for it, and that'll be the case next week, perhaps even early next week when these 2 articles move to the floor. I mean, again, this entire process moving very quickly. No change in that today. We could see the markup, the formal amendment process for these articles begin as early as tomorrow evening.
And Garrett, you and I both watching all these scheduling changes because it dramatically affects our planning for the holidays. But this is not about us, it's about the country. Let me show you what Adam Schiff said today. A little bit of cross pressure, either from the media or within the Democratic Party, or even from Republicans about why they won't turn to the courts to compel more testimony from more firsthand witnesses. Let's watch Adam Schiff and talk about it on the other side.
Some would argue, why don't you just wait? Why don't you just wait until you get these witnesses the White House refuses to produce? It has taken us 8 months to get a lower court ruling that Don McGahn has no absolute right to defy Congress. 8 months for 1 court decision. If it takes us another 8 months to get a 2nd court or maybe a Supreme Court decision, people need to understand that is not the end of the process. It comes back to us and we ask questions because he no longer has absolute immunity, and then he claims something else, that his answers are privileged and we have to go back to court for another 8 or 16 months. The argument, why don't you just wait, amounts to this. Why don't you just let him cheat in 1 more election? Why not let him cheat just 1 more time? Why not let him have foreign help just 1 more time? That is what that argument amounts to.
Garrett, if Congressman Schiff needed an exhibit to underscore his point there at the end, Lavrov is back in the Oval Office today. The Russians have met with this president 5 times. There are no known notes of any of those meetings. And while they've been banned from all sporting events, certainly not banned from the American president's home.
Yeah, nice for the Democrats to get a visual aid here in the form of this meeting with Lavrov at the White House. Look, Schiff has been one of the most consistent messengers for Democrats on the impeachment inquiry, and I think what he gets at there is really important. And I would love to see good quality polling on this question. Democrats have tried very hard to focus the impeachment inquiry, make it forward-looking, make it about an urgent threat right now and a threat to the 2020 election. When you see Republicans talk about the inquiry, you hear them talking about the idea that an impeachment would overrule voters who made their decision in 2016. It's backward looking. The idea is this was settled in 2016. Let's let the next election settle it. Democrats have been trying very hard to make an argument here that the next election is put in jeopardy by the president's conduct. And it's really that question. Do you think this is about overturning the will of voters in 2016 or protecting the will of voters in 2020 that is so central to whatever ongoing debate might exist in the minds of undecided voters, undecided Americans, or perhaps even undecided members of Congress trying to figure out how they might vote come next week?
You know, Michael Steele, it's a really important political point. And I think the idea that this is not about punishing Donald Trump, it's about protecting America. If you see a few weeks down the road some cracks in that GOP firewall, not enough to convict him, but enough to make it symbolically bipartisan vote on conviction, I think it will be this message of protecting future presidential elections from Russian meddling.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to that point. And the way Congressman Schiff put that narrative, focused that narrative, I think is very, very important, not just for Democrats in the politics of doing impeachment, but for the country to begin to kind of come into this conversation. Because whether or not they've spent the last 8 months paying attention to this, they will when this goes to the Senate. Everyone loves a good trial. This is OJ on steroids because it involves the president of the United States, and it involves something that is massively big, and it has all kinds of narratives related to, you know, what the president did or didn't do in history and all of that. So people will tune in. So it's going to be incumbent that Schiff begin to set that tone now. And what it does is it tells Republicans in the Senate, I get you. I know where you are. I know you got him breathing on one side of your neck and you got the House Republicans breathing on the other. But here's a road that you can get on. All of you won't, but you can get on it. And to your point, Nicole, it's a little bit of a safe harbor because this is about what happens in the future. We're not relitigating 2016. This is not undoing the 2016 presidential election. This is about looking at 2020 and beyond, and the proper role, the proper balance between executive authority, executive behavior, oversight by the Congress, et cetera.
Let me ask you about the other big headline that we started with today. If Barr is so confident in his supreme power, why do all this stuff? I mean, you and I worked with Republicans, and the ones who really don't care about the press don't do national interviews and complain about the press. The ones who really believe that the Durham investigation is going to go their way don't force a statement out of Durham, the person running the investigation. Right. The ones who really think the president doesn't have any worries about GOP support in the Senate don't do what they did in the last 24 hours, which is 2 written statements from the Justice Department, one, in my personal opinion, seemingly coerced written statement from Mr. Durham, and a quick pivot to a media campaign that is, even for Barr, somewhat unprecedented.
Well, my estimation on that is all of this activity is a tell. And the tell is the Constitution got you. This doesn't pass constitutional muster. This doesn't get you on that sweet side, on the right side of history. So what you try to do is you game the system. As like a good prosecutor knows, and we've heard it said before, if you argue the facts, that's one thing. If you're arguing emotion, and that's another. If you ain't got no argument, you just make a whole lot of hand motions and move about. And what you see happening right now with Barr and with others is they're making a lot of hand motions because the more confused the public is going into next year's trial, the better it is for them. And you want to diminish, you want to dumb down this conversation to the point where people look and go, well, I just don't understand what's happening.
Well, you know, Carol Lee, Mark Mazzetti in the New York Times has a great piece about turning the Trump base's attention toward the Durham investigation, which is the additional Barr sanctioned investigation, if you will. Barr accompanied, Barr assisted. I don't know what we want to how I want to describe Barr's role. He has traveled with Mr. Durham to foreign capitals to participate in the investigation. Mark Mazzetti writes this: the president, his attorney general, his supporters in Congress followed a script they've used for nearly 3 years, engaged in a choreographed campaign of presidential tweets, Fox News appearances, and fiery congressional testimony to create expectations about finding proof of a deep state campaign against Mr. Trump. And then, when the proof does not emerge, skew the results and prepare for the next opportunity to execute the playbook. So here's a problem. They have to bet that the Trump base will accept that Jim Comey, a registered Republican, I think, Andy McCabe, a registered Republican, Bob Mueller, a registered Republican, Horowitz, who's been harsh on Democrats and Republicans, all met in some treehouse and hatched some plot. And they all came to the same conclusion: the investigation into Russia was necessary, and called for Donald Trump's campaign and its 150-plus contacts were worthy of investigation. All of the tactics, as Christopher Wray said, were justified, even if they weren't all used perfectly, as the report suggests there were problems. And then they're putting all their eggs in this one other guy, Mr. Durham, who's going to find something that none of those 4 Republicans found. I mean, it's reckless.
Well, the thing about the president's base is that they're primed for this. This is how he won the election. This is how he's continued to maintain the support that he has, which is obviously it's not anything close to a majority. And it's just that he's the victim. He's always the victim, and they are out to get us. And whoever they is could be anybody at any given time, any of those people you just mentioned. And now he is going to pivot to this report and cherry pick things out of it, whether it's, everyone will kind of come away from it with what they would like to see in it, as he did with the IG report. And we'll see that happen here. So it almost is, a foregone conclusion. It almost does. Not that it doesn't matter what's in the report, but it doesn't in the sense that the president's going to say what he wants to about it, and he's going to find things in there that suit his narrative, and his base is, again, primed to continue to hear this sort of narrative in which the president is always the victim and they are out to get him.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.